Hello, I'm Gail, and thank you for joining me today on the Secular Scriptures for a reading and discussion of Genesis chapter 23, The Death and Burial of Sarah, from the World English Bible, a free public domain translation of the Bible, without which this study would not be possible. If you are just here for the reading and don't want to stay for the discussion, enjoy as you please. And I will see you in the next video. I do hope you will stay for some history, literary analysis, comparative mythology, and conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. Not that there's very many controversies with this particular chapter. This is a secular Bible study, so bury your urge to proselytize and keep any apologetics away from my site. I'm not a biblical scholar, I just love these stories. Discussions in the comments are welcome, fighting is not, please keep it civil. Different translations say different things, so please list the translation you are using if and when you quote a Bible passage. No disparaging somebody's preferred book. I like the NRSV. Please keep it on topic. The topics today are Sarah, Abraham, death rituals, and land acquisition, because those go together real well. Grab a tasty beverage and let's read. Genesis chapter 23. Sarah lived 127 years. This was the length of Sarah's life. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba, also called Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Abraham rose up from before his dead and spoke to the children of Heth, saying, I am a stranger and a foreigner living with you. Give me a possession of a burying place with you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The children of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, O Lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the best of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb. Bury your dead. Abraham rose up, bowed himself to the people of the land, to the children of Heth. He talked with them, saying, If you agree that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and entreat for me to Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may sell me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is in the end of his field. For a full price let him sell it to me among you as a possession for a burial place. Now Ephron was sitting in the middle of the children of Heth. Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the hearing of the children of Heth, even of all who went in at the city gate, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. In the presence of your children of my people I give it to you. Bury your dead. Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land. He spoke to Ephron in the audience of the people of the land, saying, But if you will please hear me, I will give the price of the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there. Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My lord, listen to me. What is a piece of land worth 400 shekels of silver between me and you? Therefore bury your dead. Abraham listened to Ephron. Abraham weighed to Ephron the silver which he had named in the hearing of the children of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, according to the current merchant standard. So the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field, the cave which was in it, and all of the trees that were in the field, that were all of its borders, were deeded to Abraham for a possession in the presence of the children of Heth, before all who went in at the gate of his city. After this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. The field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the children of Heth as a possession for a burial place. So, when did Sarah end up at Hebron? And why did Abraham insist on buying the field instead of being given a burial place? And is Ephron actually trying to give the field to Abraham and then Abraham pays for it anyway? Or are these just like typically over-polite negotiation tactics of the time? And why does this seem like a cold and complicated waste of words in the face of Sarah's death? History of the text. This was written in the 5th or 6th century BCE, sometime around the Babylonian exile. Scholarly best guess dates are 586 to 539 BCE, in the Babylonian exile period, or just after the exile ends in the early Persian period. This is the priestly source. Welcome to the priestly source. We've seen them here in a few verses, but this is the first major chapter that is attributed to P. This was written either in Babylon during the exile or shortly after their return to Jerusalem. Were there edits? Of course there were edits. When are there not edits? Modern scholars believe that these sections were intended to be incorporated into the larger Torah text that was being compiled around the same time, so the redactors and the priestly source may be very closely related both in time and content, or at least this is my understanding of it, and again, remember, I'm not a biblical scholar. Literary analysis. We have characters in order of appearance. We have Sarah's corpse. Rip. Abraham, the children of Het, which I completely mispronounced in the video. It is Het. Although it's not more of a forward H, it's the backward H, so it's more like Het. And Ephron the Hittite, son of Zoar. The only one who doesn't speak is Sarah, because she's dead. The setting is in Hebron / Mamre and the field of Ephron. Abraham is 137 years old, and this takes place on the real-world timeline sometime between 2100 and 1800 BCE-ish, depending on your sources and how they do the math and blah, blah, blah. Story is told from the third-person limited point of view in a simple narrative prose style, much like a lot of the other stuff that we've seen. The plot summary is Sarah dies. Boo-hoo. Abraham pays for a field with a cave, and then she's buried in it. It's a pretty short chapter. Literary devices. The bulk of the story consists of legalistic language, which functions to assert authority, create a sense of objectivity, persuade readers through specialized terminology, and uses specific rhetorical strategies, in this case to highlight the historic event of Abraham and Ephron negotiating the sale of Ephron's field as a burial place for Abraham's family, specifically the cave. The text gives a description of the field and names the price paid with witnesses listed. Why is this important? Because it's about land ownership and property rights. This is the first and only legal acquisition of property in Canaan for Abraham. It is the foot in the door of the promised land, so to speak. Instead of being a guest and a foreigner, he now has a legal claim to a bit of land in Canaan. It is not a coincidence that this was written during or just after the Babylonian exile. Historic land claims hold more weight as people are displaced or migrate. This establishes a written record to property rights, even if it was written many hundreds of years after the purported event. Conflicts, contradictions, and controversies. And none of them are really that, actually. There's not a whole lot under disagreement here. I'm going a bit out of order with these, but I want to close with a whole lot of Sarah talk instead of real estate deals. So let's get all of the legal mumbo-jumbo out of the way. There aren't any big CCCs in this chapter, but there are some really interesting interpretations and possibilities that are actually worth talking about. Under conflicting information within the text, again, this is not exactly a conflict, but it is a little bit hazy, and there is some wiggle room for interpretation. And this is the conversation between the sons of Het and Abraham. The first interpretation is that it's just overly polite formality while negotiating a straightforward real estate deal. The second is that these folks are kind of iffy about selling the property to Abraham to bury Sarah, or they might want a favor instead of money. And the third option is that the sons of Het are looking to add Sarah and Abraham to their own ancestors for the purposes of ancestor worship. And honestly, it could be all three. Taking this in a highly literal interpretation, the sons of Het are inviting Abraham to use any of their tombs for Sarah. Is this a polite loan, a gift, a sharing, an honor done for a high-status foreigner, or cultural courtesy? It would be implied to be temporary, not a forever thing, probably extend only to Abraham and possibly his immediate family, but not much further. It's also possible that I'm inserting my own social framework on that, but that's kind of unavoidable. This take on the narrative shows deference to Abraham as a prophet, and having Sarah buried in their tomb would add to their own status as she was a prophetess. This may also mean that Abraham may owe them a favor or be indebted to them in some way. If the people were into ancestor worship, the shining woman would be a power level up in that regard. They would also likely gain Abraham himself after death. Note that I'm not basing this on any archaeology or personal knowledge of the people of the time. It's just one of the proposed interpretations. Go down and see the sources. If we take the earlier Bible passages of when they resided in Hebron and one of the later Midrash stories within this context into account, she may also have been known to these people and beloved by them as a well-respected community member already. It's equally possible that this is just flowery language of land sale negotiations. This will be a new neighbor after all, and everybody wants good relations, even if it's just once in a while for a funeral. In this interpretation, Abraham wants clear ownership of the tomb so that his rights are undeniable. So what is easily given can be easily taken away. One Midrash tradition holds that Abraham knew about the cave from the time that he was living in Hebron and believed it to be the resting place of Adam and Eve, which is why he wanted this particular location. Conflicting information within religion and society. And again, this is not exactly a conflict. More of a potential change? I don't know. Or maybe a setting apart. Like there's something going on here. We have some phrasing that may illustrate a cultural shift from ancestor worship to the idea that the spirits of the dead do not linger. Or at least that Abraham's tradition will not be fussing with them, which I think is probably more likely. And that is very interesting because Abraham and Sarah came out of Ur of the Chaldeans, which I said correctly this time. There are two repeated phrases, one from Abraham and one from the sons of Het. Abraham says, "Bury my dead out of my sight." And the out of my sight is kind of important here. The sons of Het say, "Bury your dead." This could be seen as an interplay between competing death traditions, and to be honest, I'm kind of fond of it. I actually really like this interpretation. Am I basing this on fact? No, I'm basing this completely on vibes. This is the first mention of funerary practices in the Bible, but these were well-established traditions by the time of this writing. The chapter is what amounts to historical fiction, even if it was based on cultural memory of a real event. And not only were these beliefs well-established, they'd been morphing over 1,000 years by then, just to blur the lines between fiction and reality for funsies. And as I write this sentence, I do not actually know how much Babylonian beliefs play into this story, either joining traditions or setting the Israelites apart from them, but we're all about to find out. Contradictions in the text. There is a potential contradiction between the locations mentioned in Genesis 23 of Hebron and the book of Acts, which says that the patriarchs are buried in Shechem. To be honest, I don't really care. And we may explore that when we get to Acts 10 years from now, but probably not. I am not going to address the use of the word Hittite here, not because it isn't interesting in and of itself, but just because I'm not interested in exploring it. I want to talk about Sarah. All right, contradictions with science. Obviously, humans do not live as long as the patriarchs in the stories do. Yes, I am beating a dead horse. See the chart. In this fantastical timeline, Shem is still alive. Yes, friends, that's right. Our boy Shem, the great-granddaddy of them all, is going strong. So Noah died when Abraham was 58 years old and Sarah was 48 years old before they left Ur for Haran. And Shem outlives both of them. And I also want to remind you that many people believe that Shem and Melchizedek are one and the same person. Okay, with all the legalese and nothing burgers out of the way, we can move on to Comparative Mythology, the Biblical Expansion Pack. Let's talk about Sarah. This is what I was here for. All I wanted to do was talk about Sarah. Why was Sarah in Hebron? Well, we have a bunch of theories on the Jewish end about this. First is that Abraham and Sarah had moved back to Hebron from Beersheba without the Bible mentioning it. I don't put much stock in this, but it's one of the theories, so I'm listing it. Next is the idea that Sarah wanted to die in the Promised Land, so she had her servants take her there for her last days or weeks or whatever. And Abraham follows later for some unmentioned reason. Another more serious version, Abraham comes down the mountain alone, without Isaac, and whether Isaac is resurrected or whether he just didn't kill him and they didn't go down the mountain together, it does not say. But in this one, it implies that Isaac and Sarah separate from Abraham and go to live in Hebron together. Isaac is not mentioned in the Bible at this point, but this version favors the younger timeline for Isaac, where he's not 37 years old, he's more like, 15 years old. The last versions have Sarah dying at the same time as the binding of Isaac, and they come from Genesis Rabbah, a collection of Midrash stories which date from 3 to 500 CE, and the Preki de Rabbah Eliezer from the 700 CE. This collection of tales tell of how, upon realizing that Abraham and Isaac were gone, Sarah tried to follow after to stop the sacrifice from happening. In one version, Samael appears to her and lies, telling her that Abraham has sacrificed Isaac, at which point she drops dead. In another, she goes on after the first lie, and when she reaches Hebron, he comes to her again and tells her the truth that Isaac is still alive, at which point she dies from pure joy. Ironically, the Christian and secular theories align and acknowledge that Sarah dying in Hebron is a plot device. Of course, the Christians want to dress it up, saying that Sarah died in Hebron because God, in his presence, wove her death into the unfolding covenant drama, confirming the land promise, authenticating patriarchal history, and prefiguring the purchased redemption ultimately fulfilled in the risen Christ, aka a plot device. Babylonian influence on the afterlife beliefs. Yay! We actually have some real comparative mythology. Like these cultures were actually interacting. They're actually influencing each other here. It's around the time of the Babylonian exile that we start to see mentions of Sheol in the literature, though earlier remnants do exist. Sheol is the early concept of the Israelite afterlife. To explain it very badly, Sheol is a place under the flat earth that is darkness and dust. So like a cave, okay? It sounds kind of awful when you put it that way, but many people find it incredibly comforting. It's not quite annihilation, but one step away from it. An eternal sleep with one's ancestors and eventually their descendants. Laying Sarah to rest in the cave at Machpelah is a physical act that is about as close as one can get to the allegory of the afterlife at this time. This mirrors the Babylonian afterlife ruled by the goddess Erishkigal of the underworld. This was a place of darkness where souls of the dead only weakly mimicked living actions, and grave goods were important for the well-being of those who passed into death. But the use of them was pale compared to how the Egyptians imagined things to be. Food offerings to the dead were common, not out of love, but out of fear of hungry ghosts if they were not satiated. As time goes on in the Israelite tradition, we start to see a partitioning of the underworld, the beginnings of a notion of hell, where the wicked suffer, and the seeds of heaven, where righteousness, if not exactly rewarded, is at least made comfortable. It's not until the Hellenistic period that the full ideas of a modern heaven and hell are born, and earthly actions impact eternal fate, and heaven moves to the firmament instead of the underworld. And, because I do love me a good dead body story, there is a midrash about the opening of the tomb of the patriarchs that is both beautiful and touching. Abraham rests in Sarah's embrace on their stone loculi, and Sarah's bones are shining in death as she had in life. Okay, short chapter, short episode. I want to thank you for joining me on the Secular Scriptures. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments why you think Sarah was in Hebron when she breathed her last, and any other thoughts that you may have on this chapter, because honestly, it was kind of boring. I'm not sure when the next Genesis video will be out because I'm actually going to attend a talk on church hurt this Sunday. And that got moved right to the top of my to-do list for next week. But regardless, we will be done with almost all of the sadness in Genesis and move right into the rollicking rom-com with Isaac and Rebekah and their boisterous twin boys.